All right, well, hello and welcome to today's Hot Topics training on the new vendor payment options in Sage Intacct. We will also review the new R2 release of Sage Intacct. My name is Sarah Novak. I am Marketing Manager at LBMC Technology Solutions, and I'm just going to go over some quick housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone is muted. So if you experience any technical difficulties, please let us know using the chat panel. We will be taking questions throughout today's webinar, so please feel free to submit them at any time. We'll also be offering CPE for this webinar. In order to qualify for the CPE credits, you must stay on the entire session and answer any polling questions when prompted. If you have any issues with the polling questions, please just make sure and send me a chat that you're having any issues. We will be recording this session and sending it out in a few days' time as well. So now I'd like to introduce Martha Reinhart. She will be presenting today, and she serves as our Senior Intacct Consultant with LBMC Technology Solutions. She's been in the accounting world for over 20 years. So thank you again for joining us, Martha, and I will turn it over to you.
Discussion will be in two parts. First, I'm going to talk about your payment options to pay your vendors within Sage Intacct, with a particular focus on a new feature that allows you to pay from within the AP module. So our learning objectives for today are to review your current options for making vendor payments within Intacct, to understand the process utilized by CSI, which is Corporate Spending Innovations. I will show you how to enroll in this service and teach you where to get more information on vendor payments by CSI. I'd like to start by looking at the overall process of vendor payments. They consume a great deal of an accounting department's time and energy. As you are all well aware, processing transactions and paying vendor bills is a huge part of your role every month. On average, Sage Intacct customers pay approximately 200 bills per month. Research by Audit Partners puts the average fully loaded cost for AP to pay vendors at $10 per bill. This estimate is based on the time spent receiving the invoice from the mail, or possibly tracking it down from another department, entering the invoice details into your bill payment system, possibly getting it approved, routing it, and then selecting it for payment. If you're still printing paper checks, you've got to think about the cost of that check stock, the printer ink, the postage, and possibly fees for late payment if things are not getting there on time. This means the average all-in monthly cost just to pay your vendors could be about $2,000 per month. What if you could reduce that cost with an electronic process integrated within Sage Intacct? Currently, your options for some sort of automation within Intacct, in case you're unaware, you can process an ACH payment file. This is standard functionality for Intacct, where you generate a file and then upload it to your bank. Now, the pro of this option is cost. It's usually free from your bank. There's no cost with Intacct for sure. And then a con would be you would have to manage the vendor payment information. So you have to make sure the routing numbers and the account numbers are current. And then another con would be if you're doing payments by check and this option, then you would have to make those payments by check in AP, and then you'd have to go over to cash management, generate that ACH file, and then upload it to your bank, which can be a little cumbersome. If you're looking for more automation, you should definitely consider other options. That could be a third-party app. This would be a fully automated option, but it is external. So you would have to engage with Bill.com or an AvidXchange or Airbase or Concur. There's lots of vendors out there that offer this integration with Intacct. And a pro of this method would be efficiencies. They are often offering optical character recognition, which is OCR, where they read the invoice and they can automatically fill in information based on artificial intelligence. And they also manage your vendor bank details. So the vendor has to sign up through them, and they keep track of the routing number and the account number and things like that. But then a downside of one of these applications is definitely cost. You're going to pay a monthly fee usually to them, plus a transaction fee, and possibly per user fee. So if you're wanting to utilize them for the approvals, you're going to have more users. So that option could get costly. Which is why Intacct now is developing or has developed an option that they can offer you within Intacct that is going to be a seamless process, much more cost effective. And that is the new option for vendor payments from CSI, Corporate Spending Innovations. They are a third-party separate company that has partnered with Intacct to offer their technology together, where it is a seamless process from Intacct through Corporate Spending Innovations to the vendors to get them paid. This is a replacement for the Wells Fargo Payment Manager, which was previously offered within Intacct. That will be fully retired on July 14th. But Intacct does still offer the Amex payment method. If you're using that, it is not going away. This is just a new option that is less expensive than the Amex option, but you do have a choice in those two. The con for this method is there are two downsides that we've learned so far. Is you cannot pay individuals, so you couldn't use this method for expense reimbursement, say, of your employees or subcontractor 1099 type individuals. And then you can't pay in other currencies. So if you have international vendors that need payment in their native currency, you would need another option for those. And again, the greatest advantage of this new method is the seamlessness. You're going to be able to define the vendor payment method in Intacct as CSI. Then you're going to be able to select those bills just like you're doing now in Intacct on the Pay Bills screen, and then push those payments directly into CSI. And CSI also offers a dashboard for you to go in, and you can then even have more control as to when the payments are made from CSI, and or approvals can happen either through the Intacct system or through CSI. So that may allow more flexibility with your internal processes, or possibly more users. I don't know the specifics on how many users can participate in that part, but it does look like a good option for bill approvals. And CSI will keep you posted on where the payment is in the process. So the dashboard that I reference, you'll be able to see where your payments are in the process and when the payment is made and the cash clears the bank. If CSI has issued through a check or something, then your payment system, your status will be updated in Intacct to say either posted or paid. And so that visibility is a big advantage. Another advantage is the cost savings, the potential for revenue earnings. So this option not only is a lower cost, but allows you possibility to earn rebates back. And I will dive into more specifics into that in just a moment. Now it's time for our first polling question. Are you still printing paper checks out of Intacct to pay at least half your bills? So if you are, I encourage you to consider the cost in the time that you're spending. As I went through all the processing time, as well as the delay that it takes to get your vendor paid. I think most vendors would really appreciate speeding that process up. So hopefully you will consider looking into an electronic option. And if you have questions about that, please feel free to ask during this presentation. We'll be happy to, help answer questions about how to do that. So I mentioned the ability to earn revenue, and I want to talk a little bit about that, how you'll see the savings and where the potential is for earning rebates. So first, you're going to reduce the transaction cost because CSI is going to handle a lot of the more manual activities. They could send checks. They could still send paper checks to your vendors if your vendor prefers that, but CSI will handle the manual activities, stuffing the envelopes, mailing the payments, and then if they're utilizing ACH, they will do the upload to the bank and update the payment status. And on average, we have seen our customers save 33 hours per month in these processing tasks, which enables your AP department to regain $1,000, over $1,000 a month of productivity. Second, if we look at those same 200 monthly bills that our average Intacct customer pays, just by switching to CSI, you're going to be cutting costs, and you can further reduce these costs by an additional 56% if you utilize CSI's expertise in recruiting vendors to accept a virtual card payment. What that is, so your vendor will have an option to receive checks from CSI or ACH or a virtual card, and CSI will educate your vendor on that process and try to encourage them to accept that virtual card. It benefits them and you in that you would receive rebates for every vendor that takes CSI up on the virtual card option. They would pay you based on the volume of your AP payments. And so this is where you would get the cash back. So looking at a typical monthly AP spend for our early adopters, this program was put into practice a few months ago in an early adopter program, and Intacct tracked the progress of the clients that did that, and they were able to convert approximately 47% of vendors to accept the virtual cards, which allowed them the $1,000+ per month in rebates, just simply by paying their bills.
Martha, this is
Yes.
Sarah. We had a question come in, and I just thought since you were talking about virtual cards, someone was asking exactly what a virtual card is. Do you mind explaining?
Oh, sure. So it's a credit card without a card, basically. So CSI would give your vendor a number and an amount, the amount of the invoice, and an electronic number they would put in as if they were running a credit card number. And it would be funded with the amount of the invoice that you owe them. And so it'd be just like them taking a credit card for the payment, but it's just an electronic number issued by CSI with the exact amount of that invoice on it to make the payment. So CSI utilizes a bank partner to front that money and then pay it back. And so that's in the money flow, all in there. That's where the interest comes from, and that's where the ability to earn the rebates comes from, is through that money movement arrangement. Does that answer their question?
Yeah, that was a great explanation. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. So how do you sign up and start using? So I am going to walk through a very detailed process, which is outlined on these slides. And I believe Sarah will be sending these slides out after the session. So you will have all the instructions. The first thing you're going to do is any admin user on your team can go into company, admin, subscriptions in Intacct, and in subscriptions, you'll scroll down to the O's, they're listed alphabetically, to outbound payment services and view options. And this is where you will see the American Express option, and then you'll see vendor payments powered by CSI. And you will turn that on, and you'll get a little warning that it may result in additional charges, but it doesn't. That's just the standard warning that it gives you anytime you turn on a subscription on that page. And so just click through that and say configure. And the snapshot on the left that says configure vendor payments powered by CSI, this will pop up, but it won't have the status or that blue button register yet. It'll only have email for notifications. So this is where the person that's going to be completing the application process will put in their email. And this email address can be changed later to then the AP person that will be the contact for CSI. But initially, this is the administrative person that will have authority to bind the company, so to speak, in a contract, because they're going to be asking for a lot of information. So you put your email address in and you submit, or click subscribe, I think is what it says. And then that status will not be there for a few minutes or possibly an hour or so. We've kind of worked through this and seen it's not immediate. So once you subscribe, you can leave that screen and come back to it. And when you come back, when the register for CSI button is there, then you can proceed. And so you'll want to click that button, and then the screen on your right will open, and it'll ask for a little more information, your tax ID number, and your company name, and then you submit that, and you wait for that step 2 where it says receive email. And while waiting for that email, you'll need to proceed with the application process, which will include gathering quite a bit of information. And I have a list detailing that out next. So while you're waiting for the email, you'll want to get this information together, if not before. Your company structure, so you'll need the tax ID, of course, and the description of your company and source of income, meaning this is going to ask about any parent corporation. If your parent company is foreign based, CSI will not do business with you. So they want to know if your source of income, I don't know what the choices are, if there's an option, but you would just put like your internal revenue, your sales, or whatever your business is. And then your NAICS code can be found on your tax return, the number of years in business, and the type of entity, meaning a corporation, LLC, a partnership, whatever type of structure you have. And then if you are owned by individuals, you will need copies of their driver's licenses and information about their percentage of ownership, the last 4 digits of their social, their phone number, their date of birth, email, home address. And then the driver's license, you'll need information off of it, and you'll need copies. So you might as well just go ahead and get a copy of each one of them. And then you need a reference from your bank, a person and phone number that they can reach out to. And then the actual documents that you will need to upload, more than just answer questions, will be, like I said, copies of the driver's license, your W-9 form, and 2 types of business verification. So your articles of incorporation, or your Secretary of State certificate, or business license. And those items will actually be uploaded during the process. And then after you get all of that done, all the required parties will have to sign a DocuSign agreement. So that will come to their email addresses. So another polling question: are you using one or more of the vendor payment options listed below? Most companies are using multiple methods, which can get even more cumbersome to try and manage. So I encourage you to, really consider CSI, in that you could do everyone this way. If you're a U.S. company paying just bills in U.S. dollars, you could use this for everything except for individuals, like I said. And I believe they will be making improvements. CSI will be possibly expanding that in the future. Right now, I'm assuming it's based on the type of checking account that the organization or person has. So I had a question yesterday that if you're paying, one of our clients was paying an individual physician, but it was going to the physician practice. And although the check was made out to that physician, the checking account was a business checking account. And I think that would be fine. I don't know for sure, but what I suggested to them was that they submit all of their options, all the vendors they want to pay, and then let CSI determine whether they're going to be able to pay them or not. All right, so after your subscription status shows as subscribed, you will be able to add and enable your bank accounts for the payment provider. This does allow for bank accounts at the entity level and multiple bank accounts. So if you have a lot of entities paying bills, don't worry, CSI can handle it. So again, you'll go to Company, Admin, Outbound Payment Services, and click Configure again. So now when you click Configure, you'll have more options, and you'll be able to select the bank accounts that you want to enable from a drop down. So it will offer you the accounts that you have in Intacct. And then for printed checks, you're going to tell CSI that the number to start with. So it can issue checks in your normal sequence and then save. And then you're going to need to contact your bank to allow ACH transactions from CSI with the two company IDs listed below. They are identical except for the second digit, 4 versus A, but they'll need both of them. And then another part of the process will be updating some of your data in Intacct. So the first thing relates to your entity information. So on the company setup entities page, there is information about each one of your entities. And this is likely already complete, but you just want to double check that it does have a legal contact information, tax ID, federal ID, address, and an email address for the company. And then a second thing you want to do is if you've ever used the American Express payment services and you are switching, you need to unsubscribe your vendors from that service. And then you want to update all the vendor information to make sure that you have correct email addresses and phone numbers for them, because that is what CSI is going to rely on to contact them. So you need to have those accurate in your Intacct records. And then finally, you're going to want to notify your vendors that you are changing to this service. So if you're sending paper checks now, maybe just print a slip of paper notifying them of the change and put that in the next few bill payment cycles, or send out a mass email letting them know, because CSI will be contacting them and they need to know to look for it. So based on some of our experience at LBMC, one of my colleagues has gone through this process with a client and put together this estimate of a timeline. So there are sort of parallel timelines as far as some things are going to happen on days 1 and 3, and some other things might happen on days 1 and 3, depending on the scenario. And these are estimates, but just to give you an idea of how long it will take to make the transition, I'm going to walk through just a sample of our experience on timeline. So on day 1, client, that's you, enables CSI on the Intacct vendor record. And then Intacct will automatically send vendor information over to CSI based on that switch that you do. And then within CSI, your vendor is going to be immediately enrolled in check delivery as a default. And then CSI is going to further look into that particular vendor to see if that vendor is accepting the virtual cards from another CSI customer. They have a massive database of all the vendors that are taking virtual cards. So, you know, somebody like Verizon or AT&T, you know, a lot of us are paying one of those vendors. So chances are they're already in CSI's database. And so the first section is if CSI finds them in their database, it's a V card match, meaning that vendor does take the V card, then CSI will call them to confirm their acceptance and terms, and then enroll them in your V card acceptance program. And then CSI will send a confirmation email to you indicating that your vendor selected the V card payment method, and the system payment method for that vendor will get changed to V card in Intacct. Now, if CSI does not find them in their database, then they're going to try and get them to enroll in the V card payment method. So CSI is going to send them a welcome email with a link to register and select their payment preference. And CSI will copy you in that email. And when I say you, this would be the part where maybe you want to change that contact information to your AP manager, controller, whoever's going to be managing the logistics of this process. Then those email confirmations will come to that person. And then the vendor has 3 days to register their payment preference. So that email link is only valid for 3 days, which is why you want to notify them in advance to be on the lookout for this email from CSI. So these are the scenarios of what happens next if the vendor selects check. If they select check, then CSI is going to send a confirmation email to you, and nothing else has to happen in the system, because remember, they were defaulted to check in the beginning. And so their record already says check. Now, if they select ACH, then CSI will do a test on that vendor's bank account and make sure it's successful. So they'll, you know, put a penny or something in and ask the vendor to confirm. And that's going to take a few days. So, you know, we could be up to like day 12 by now for vendors that are choosing ACH. So then CSI will send a confirmation email to you indicating your vendor's selected method, and the system payment method for vendor will be changed to ACH. And then if vendor does select a V card, CSI is going to call them to confirm. So on that automated link, when they select V card, that'll trigger CSI to make a phone call. Again, why you need to have your vendor's accurate phone and email. contact information. When they confirm with the vendor, then that vendor is enrolled in the V card, and CSI sends a confirmation email to you indicating your selected payment method. And so, see, this process can be complete in 5 to 6 days. Are there any questions on that, Sarah?
No, I don't see any questions right now.
Okay, great. So finally, our last polling question of this section. Do you think you will try this new payment method within the next year? So I realize the steps sound cumbersome, they sound a little overwhelming, but I think that you'll find if you go through this process in the beginning, it'll be a little bit of work, but once you get it done, it will really make your life and AP team's life better. In addition, I know that Intacct is coming out with more and more ways to automate and improve the process. And I think CSI will continue to improve as well.
Martha, we do have a question. The question is, does CSI take a lump sum out of our bank, or do individual checks clear our bank?
So that's a great question. In the initial, the early adopter program, sorry, I couldn't think of the word, they did not have a choice. But now, as you'll hear in my new release update, you have a choice whether you want the cash to come out individually by payment or in a lump sum. And that you should really look at your bank the way they charge your transaction fees to make that determination, because you could have more fees if you have it taken out individually by payment rather than in a lump sum. So you just want to evaluate that before you make your choice.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So in closing, this payment method by CSI does offer you more ways to pay and save and potentially earn money. So I hope you will consider this method, and feel free to reach out to us and ask any questions about helping you get enrolled if you'd like to move to this feature.
Martha, we do have another question. They want to know, what are the fees to use CSI?
Great question. So there is no subscription fee, no additional Intacct fee at all. Then the transaction fees are 10 cents per ACH and 80 cents per check, and nothing for the virtual card. And then all the AP volume that is paid by virtual card, you will be paid 0.5% of the volume. So if you're paying some really expensive bills, those are the vendors that you hope will take the virtual card, then that money will come back as a rebate and it will offset those fees. And you'll get a monthly bill showing the transaction fees, less the rebates, and then the net due. So your payment to CSI would be made once a month, not within the transaction. So you'd see a full bill and a recounting of the whole service.
Great, thank you. Oh, sorry, Martha, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was gonna switch gears whenever you're ready to do the new release.
Yep, I don't see any other questions right now, but if anybody thinks of anything, please feel free to still submit it.
Sure.
And I know Martha is going to transition now to the R2 release portion of the Hot Topics training. But just real quickly, I wanted to remind everyone to stay on after she's done. We have a special short segment afterwards by FloQast, and they are going to talk about best practices for your month-end close. And everybody that stays on gets a $50 lunch gift card. So it's really, really good content, and we really encourage you to stay on and listen. So I just wanted to remind everyone of that. And Martha, I'll let you take it away with the new release.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So this portion of my presentation will cover the latest quarterly release from Sage Intacct. As you may or may not be aware, many of the updates each quarter are based on ideas submitted by customers like you that are posted in the Intacct community. And if you do not have access to the community, please let us know and we'll be happy to assist you with gaining access. It's a really good resource for you to network with other Intacct users, as well as other implementation consultants and product experts. So you can ask questions, and occasionally the actual Intacct product manager will answer the questions, which is great. And every quarter they produce these new releases, and they will put the release notes on your homepage. If you have not noticed them or taken the time to read them, I encourage you to do that. And when you click on those links, they also have recordings from the various product managers that go into more details. So that's where some of my information has come from, but they do have more in depth. So feel free to check that out if you need any more information than I provide you today. So we will go through all the new features, and we will review the remaining release dates for 2022. So the highlights of this release, Intacct has organized into 3 major themes. They really wanted to focus on creating best-in-class financials. So in order to do that, they've expanded some AP automation improvements. They have enhanced dunning notice support in AR, and they have also made some improvements in tax area, specifically for international clients. The second focus area is on deep cross-industry functionality. In this, they are improving the functionality of contracts, construction, and inventory. And I will dive into each of these. And the third major theme of this update relates to best-in-class cloud platforms. So they want to be recognized as the best cloud platform out there. And in doing that, they have introduced a new branding. They have improved their data delivery service, and they are working on expanding the list user experience within Intacct. So the first area I will go through are the enhancements made in the company and admin area. First up is they are migrating everyone to a multi-entity environment, meaning if you were just a single entity, you will now have a top level and a single entity. You may have already seen this change, but after this release, everyone will be finalized into a multi-entity environment. They have made changes to the audit report, and I will go into more detail of what's improved and how you need to update your audit report in your environment in order to experience these improvements. Then they have enabled additional fields to be exported in data delivery service. Data delivery service is an additional subscription that you must already have in your environment. And if you do, there are improvements made to it that I will show you. And then in relation to several of the changes that I will go through, specifically in cash management and AR, there are new permissions that will need to be turned on. By default, they're automatically left off. And so if these new features are things that you and or a member of your team intends to take advantage of and utilize, then an admin user will need to update those permissions for the particular user that's going to need them. And I will show you those as well. So the audit history report. First, you need to verify that you have one. This is something that should have been developed and deployed during your implementation. If you did not have LBMC do that, you might not have it in the same place, but our common practice is to deploy it on the general ledger module. So you would go to general ledger, all, and then over in the right, custom reports. When you click on that, it should expand, and you may have a list of a lot of custom reports, or you may just see that audit report. Another place you could go is in reports, just on the pull down menu of reports. If you went to custom reports and clicked on the name, then you would see a list of your custom reports. And if you don't see audit report there, then you can submit a help ticket and we can deploy the audit report for you. It's a custom report that takes 5 minutes for us to build and put in your environment. But if you do have it, it previously had these columns shown at the bottom. So what's that? 10 columns were on the report telling you the access date, the user, the action, any details, the object that was changed or manipulated, and then notes in the far right of something to do with the activity that was performed. So that is the pre-release audit report. And now the audit report includes 3 new columns. If in this example, if the field term was changed on either a vendor or a customer, and previously it was net 30 and then was changed to net 60, you would see this in the audit report. You would see the column for field and then the column before and the column after. So you actually see the details of what changed. But these 3 columns have to be added into the format of the report. So in order for you to do that, you need to edit your report. So when you go to the custom reports list, as I mentioned, if you see audit report there, you click on the edit to the left. And then it has steps. And so you would click next to get to step 2. You'll see down at the bottom, this is step 2, where you choose the columns that you want to include in the report. And there will be 3 new columns that are not selected. and you'll want to select those 3 new columns. And then next again and next again to get to step 4. On step 4, you can drag and drop these columns into any order that you want to see them in. So they'll default at the very bottom. I moved them up a little bit, just personal preference. And then after this step, you can ignore the remaining steps and just save your report as is. Nothing else needs to change. You don't have to rename it or anything, just hit save and done, and then run the report to test it out. So it'll prompt you for date ranges. Just put in a range of dates and see everything that comes out on the audit report and see those fields. So hopefully that will add a little more visibility to you into what's been changed and what's been done in the environment. The next in company and administration relates to data delivery service. So as I mentioned, you have to be subscribed to this already, and you would see it on the company setup tab. Data delivery service is a way to export massive amounts of data. You can extract any data you want out of your system and upload it to a cloud storage service, and it can be scheduled or run on demand. And Intacct designed this in order to export all the data of a certain type, such as general ledger data or vendors or employees or inventory. And then its primary goal is to export all the records for each object that you select. So the object is listed in the bottom of that snapshot on the right. If you're looking for items related to a location name, a department name, usually an entry or an amount object, but then if you want additional information related to it, you can now select specific fields. So like in the top, they're selecting the object sales document, and previously you could only select sales document, but now you can select individual fields related to the sales document that you want to export. And if you are subscribed to this, you would select either manual or automatic under that data delivery service. And then in the selected fields column, click select to choose the specific fields from an object, and then select the specific ones on the right that go with it, and then run it or schedule it. So if you're utilizing this service, hopefully you find this a little more user-friendly and provides you the ability to get more information saved out of your system. And finally, in company and admin, as I said, you will have new permissions. I mentioned AR and cash management. So these are the new rows that you'll see in those 2 areas. And then under projects, if you subscribe to projects, you will see several new rows that allow you to update permissions for projects. Now moving on to accounts payable. As covered earlier in my presentation, everyone now has access to vendor payments by CSI. That's part of this new release. And then it does include a few enhancements from the early adopter version. And then another thing in AP is going to be continuation of an early adopter program, unrelated to CSI, but related to AP bill automation. That is a big focus of Sage Intacct right now. And so there is still an early adopter program for AP bill automation separate from CSI, and I'll go into more details of that. And then the vendor record has changed in AP. You'll notice some changes on the summary header, and I'll highlight those in a future slide. So the enhancements from the early adopter program for vendor payments by CSI have to do with the payment withdrawal options, as I mentioned earlier. You can now select how you want funds withdrawn from your bank account. You can choose a lump sum option, or you can choose per transaction. And this selection method cannot be changed after you set it up. And so if you were part of the early adopter program and you're already using vendor payments by CSI, you'll need to log a support case to change this selection if you are interested in making a change there. And then the second enhancement that they made since the early adopter program relates to electronic signature settings. So now you have the option to indicate that your uploaded digital signature is only for payments sent through payment services. Previously in the early adopter program, I think it applied the digital signature to all circumstances, and clients didn't like that because they wanted to be able to print a manual check and have it physically signed, but it was putting the electronic signature on it. So now you can restrict that if you want to only use for payment services. So these are the enhancements related to the early adopter program I mentioned. Intacct is focusing on automation, as is the world, and they're trying to eliminate manual steps. So this early adopter program is available for you to enroll in, I believe. So if you're interested, please reach out to LBMC, submit a ticket, and ask about it, and we'll get more information for you. But this functionality involves an email address and or an upload button in your AP to vendors can forward emails directly to the email address that Intacct's going to provide, and or you can upload a bill to it, and then Intacct will create a draft bill from that inbox and populate it with the data captured. So this is where their internal software is incorporating the OCR I mentioned earlier that the third-party apps are already using, where they can read the bill, the system, the artificial intelligence can read the invoice and auto-populate with the GL account, the correct vendor record, any dimensions based on bill history and or the vendor record. And then in that digitized step, this will create a draft and it will include the original bill as an attachment. So after the AP bill automation part has processed that bill, all that's left for you to do is review and post. And reviewing is easy using the new draft bills standard view. So in Intacct, these early adopters will have an option on their menu to select draft bills, and it'll give them a list view of all the bills that Intacct has processed, along with any incoming bills that Intacct is currently analyzing. So you can see the source for each automatically processed bill, either upload or email. And for email bills, you can see the sender that sent it. There's also an import exceptions column that will highlight any bills that require your attention. So it will recognize possibly duplicate bills. Maybe if a vendor forwards a bill that you uploaded previously, it'll flag it, and then you can review it, and you don't have to worry about accidentally paying it twice. So that's the beauty of this artificial intelligence, is to really eliminate some of the human errors that are so easily occurring throughout the AP workflow process. And finally, the vendor header change that I mentioned. So before the R2 release, your vendor main tab didn't have the vendor's tax ID information. Oh, sorry, that's in the next change. Tax ID is coming. The header, it didn't have, and now it has that highlighted area that says the last bill was created on and the last payment was made. And another change is on my next slide. I got ahead of myself. Is the tax ID information is now also located on that vendor main page where I have it highlighted on the right. It was previously sitting on the additional information tab, and now it's going to be on your front main tab. So the additional information tab shown on the left before the R2 release had the tax ID up under the vendor details, and then whether that vendor was taxable or not, and contact tax group that was required to be set up over there. That is different now. So this is related to a tax enhancement that has been made, and the tax information is on that right-hand side of the new release where it shows the tax solution, and you can set up a default tax schedule. So if you are using the taxes application, so if you have to collect or pay international taxes in one of these 4 countries, you can subscribe to a tax application with an Intacct, and it will automate the setup for the value added tax in South Africa or the UK, and the goods and services tax rate in Australia, and the Canadian sales tax. So these are native to Intacct. I mean, you can get the application within Intacct. You don't have to go to, say, an Avalara or TaxJar or any of those for these particular countries. Intacct offers them. And when you subscribe to these, then you will now be able to set up detailed defaults on your customer record. So a customer or vendor, actually, you will have an option in the tax calculation. In that window, you will select one of those 4 solutions, and then you will set the default tax schedule and apply it to a particular customer or vendor or contact. And this will make it easier. You only have to update the one schedule and then it gets applied to individual records based on this new box that says the tax calculation area. So this makes it easier to default to particular line level transactions for the rates, and you can always override if you need to at the time of creating that invoice or payment. So this polling question, where will you go in Intacct to find and update your audit report? So this is actually testing your listening. Could be more than one answer. As always in Intacct, Intacct likes to give you multiple ways to do the same thing. But as a reminder, this new release enhancement does require your attention. So either you or an LBMC consultant needs to make the changes to your audit report. And if you don't have an audit report, please submit a help ticket to our help desk, and we will build an audit report for you and add these new columns. So the answer here is B or C. You can go to see if LBMC configured your report and put it on the general ledger module, or if whoever deployed that report, if they put it on general ledger. Otherwise, you would go to the path listed in option B. Reports on your pull down, and then all, and there's an advanced section at the bottom of the first column, and select custom reports, and it will take you to the list, and then you edit the audit report from there to add those 3 new columns. All right, moving on to accounts receivable. The big changes in AR relate to receiving payments and dunning notices. So in the configuration of AR, you can now make 3 different changes in the configuration related to these if you want to use them. So under accounts receivable setup configuration, this is the area where your implementation consultant originally set up your AR functionality. Some of the boxes may be checked differently in your environment, but the 3 new boxes are the highlighted ones, and you have the choice to turn them on or not. The first one relates to an option to automate applying available credits when you receive a payment. So when you select the apply credits automatically functionality, then during the receive payments process, any credits that that customer has will be automatically applied using what Intacct calls the waterfall method. The waterfall method is a simple way to apply payment to invoices, in which Intacct applies to each line item of an invoice until all line items have been paid. And there's a great graphic in the release notes, and it's a link that takes you to the help center that shows you a visual of the waterfall method. And this is specifically good if you have multiple entities and a credit maybe applies to a customer that is billed through multiple entities, then there is a method to how that credit is going to get applied through the different entities as well. So you might want to check that out to learn a little bit more. And then the second box has to do with enabling automatic payment suggestions. So the default would be that it's going to make the payment suggestions automatically. But if you check it, then those suggestions are turned off and you can manually enter the payment for each selected invoice before you post it. And then the bottom box relates to the dunning notices that I will get into in more detail. So on the automatic payment suggestions, just to show you, in the original receive payments menu option, you could enter the amount that was received and it would populate the payment amount column. But this wasn't available in the new receive payment screen, and now it is apparently. And so by default, the system used to apply the payment starting with the oldest. And if the amount of the payment was sufficient to pay that invoice, the system automatically selects the receive full checkbox for that invoice, and then it applies the remainder to the next invoice and so on. And if any amount is left over, then it automatically places it in the amount overpaid in that center column. And what I did here on this example was I selected the customer, and then I typed in the amount of the check that was $2,000 that I made up. And then when I clicked select invoices on the right, it opened up and this customer had 2 invoices available. And so in the order I checked them, it came over here and applied the payment amount. And in this particular case, the check amount that was sent in was more. And so they had an amount overpaid that was automatically populated. So it just makes your data entry easier now on the new receive payment screen. If you've ever noticed, there's 2 lines for receive payment. One says receive payments new. It's not very new anymore. I don't know why it still says that, but maybe because this functionality wasn't on it before. So now it is. Excuse me. Another function improvement on the same page is in the top right corner. You now have shortcuts to create a journal entry, create an advance, or create an adjustment. So if you get to this screen and you see the amount received indicates that there was an adjustment, and maybe somebody hadn't recorded the adjustment yet, so it's not going to pop up as an available option to populate into the amount with the invoices, then you can create it first and then complete your receiving the payment right from the screen. So those are just little easy shortcuts where you don't have to leave and go out of this area. So the next big area in AR relates to dunning notices. Now, I was not familiar with this word. Been in accounting for 20+ years, and I had no idea what a dunning notice was. and that is the process of communicating with customers to collect overdue balances. I just called them collection notices. But the proper term, I guess, is dunning notice or dunning letter. And apparently, this is a common feature in third-party collection type apps that integrate with Intacct and pull your customers' detail, and maybe that third-party app like High Radius or something, one of those third-party AR solutions where they'll post the payments for you as well as monitor your AR, and they will perform your collections. Those were pretty standard functionalities in third-party solutions. So like in AP, where you had to contract with somebody like Bill.com or AvidXchange, then there are those solutions in AR that you could contract with to do your collections and send your notices and post your payments. But now you don't have to go outside of Intacct. As you can see, like the enhancements, the new releases continue to bring the functionality back within the software itself. And so I think this is pretty cool for those of you with a lot of outstanding AR, is you can configure your various dunning levels, meaning, you know, the criteria for when you're going to want to reach out. You can have, you know, 60 days or 90 days be your first one, and then a second letter at 120, and then maybe a third step, hopefully, maybe not that old. But then within the system, after you define those, then you can filter by your dunning level, and it'll automatically pull out the customers that meet that criteria. And then you can send those notices and keep track of which customer you sent notices to and when. So the Intacct system will do all of that work for you now after you do some key things to get it set up. So these are the steps that you must take initially before you will be able to do this. So the first thing will be in that AR configuration screen I showed you, the very bottom box that was highlighted blue. You'll need to select it and then save and refresh your screen. And once you do that, you'll need to go into your AR user permissions, and you will see the two highlighted rows that have no boxes checked. So in order to print or email dunning notices, you need to give yourself and or the AR staff member permission to do those things. And then whoever is going to be determining the dunning levels and setting those up, they would need the permissions on the second row. Then you want to create a document numbering sequence to assign to each level. So just like in your initial configuration, the implementation consultant might have set up document numbering for your invoices or your vendors or your customers with an ID and then an auto number feature. That's what you'll want to do here as well, so that your notices will be numbered. And you'll do that through company setup, settings, document numbering. And then if you plan to email these notices, you'll need to create email templates for each of them. If you want the language to be different depending on the level, you'll need to set up unique templates for each one of the levels that you're going to use. And then you can actually define the dunning levels by going into AR setup more dunning levels. When you go into that, you will click on the add button and you will be adding a new dunning level. So you want to give it a name and indicate the currency. If you're using multi-currency, you can set up different dunning levels for different transaction currencies. And then the printed document template default will be, you'll already have one in the system, just like an invoice default, but you can set up a custom one with your logo if you want. And so that's where that selection would come into play right there. And then, as I mentioned, you'll have unique email templates. If you are emailing, you'll have unique ones depending on the level, and you'll assign it there and then select your document sequencing that you created in the previous step. And then you want to define the criteria. How many days overdue are you going to have the system send these out, or how many maximum days overdue, and what are your min and max for the invoice amounts if you have them. So those are the types of things that you define in each one of your dunning levels. And as you can see, this particular client had quite a few in their list. So you can see different ones for different currencies. In the name, it looks like possibly, they incorporated the number of days or amounts in the name. You'll want to do that. Think about a naming convention that makes sense. And then you can see the different criteria in the columns to the right. So then when you're ready to send them, the process is going to be very similar to sending invoices or statements. You'll go to AR, and under invoices where you see print or email, you'll now have the choice to select dunning notices. So you will select that, and then you will create your filter for your criteria. So step one would be, do you want this based on the invoice date or the due date? So obviously that's going to depend on how you set up the original dunning level criteria. Then step two, you're going to choose the dunning level, one of those from the big list we just saw. The printed document template and the email template if you need it. And then if you want to attach the invoices, you can check that box in step 5, which I think is a great way to automate, resending invoices. So many times customers say they haven't paid because they misplaced the invoice or they didn't receive it or whatever, and you have to resend it. So that functionality eliminates the manual action that has been previously required to get those back out. And then the screen's going to come up similar to the way it does when you are printing invoices. You can select print or email or both. You can override the default email address here, and you can see how many invoices are attached. So this is the default printed document template that just comes with Intacct. It'll pull in, it works like a mail merge. It'll pull in the customer name and then the invoice details into that chart, into that table. And again, this is where you could build your own if you wanted it to look differently. And then the tracking of dunning notices that have been sent is really good. You have a place here where it lists the dunning notices that have been sent, the customer, um, the date that it was sent, how it was sent, the amount. So at any given point, you can follow back up and you can see the history. You can also see this on the customer record. So if a particular customer is calling in, asking questions, having any issues on their record, you will have history of what's been sent. So our next polling question. Very easy. Yes or no answer. Do you think you will use this functionality? So I know several of our clients don't have the AR management issues within Intacct that it would warrant this. So you may or may not need it, but if you do, I think it offers a real improvement in your team's efficiency and communication with your customers. You could also use it, just for various communication with any open balance or not. You can set that up and send a communication to your customers. All right, moving on to cash management. So in cash management, if you are using the bank feed where your bank account is connected to Intacct to bring in the transactions, then you should be familiar with the matching rules that have been created to try and identify the transactions that are already in your ledger that are coming through the bank feed and then being tagged to say that they're a match. Now, Intacct is trying to move to more and more automation of this of the entire reconciliation process. And so there's a new rule type for creation of a journal entry based on criteria that it finds in the bank feed. So what this is you will set up criteria for Intacct to look for in the bank feed, and when it matches, it can create a journal entry for you to be in draft state or to go automatically to posting into your cash ledger. And they will be stored in a list called reconciliation transaction templates. And so we'll look at that list. And then another enhancement in cash management relates to the rule set performance log. This is a way to see, how well your rule sets are performing. If you've been using the rules and the rule sets and you're still having to manually match a lot of your transactions, then your rules aren't working well, and your rule set performance log is going to show you that fact and help you improve them, which will ultimately increase your efficiency in the bank reconciliation process. And now your $0 transactions will appear in the reconciliation so that you can check those off as reconciled. So let's look at the create rule. This is a great feature. So in cash management setup, in the normal area where you would add a new rule, you will do the same, but there is now a type selection. You will select either a match rule or a create rule. And so this example is going to be a create rule. you'll give it an ID and a name. So I said create one and name daily deposits. So the filter area is going to tell Intacct what subset of transactions to look at. So your data source is going to be the bank transactions. And the first criteria you need to set is related to the posting date. This is a required one, just to tell Intacct when to start looking at these transactions in this way. So I made it greater than yesterday. And then the bank transactions, the next filter will be transaction type. So I want Intacct to only look at the bank transactions that are credits. And credits from the bank side are actually deposits, right? Because they're reverse from what we do with debits and credits. And then I know that in my bank import, in the way that the transactions flow, in the description field, anytime it is a deposit, then the word deposit shows up in the description. If your bank doesn't do that, then of course this third criteria wouldn't make sense for you. So you're going to want to look at some other criteria that will help you, or will help Intacct identify which transactions to apply this to. And so that was the create rule, is just telling it what to look for. And then I'm going to select a transaction type, which currently is only journal entry. In the future, I believe there will be other transaction types that will be able to be created from this process. That's coming in a future enhancement. So the template I selected was the daily deposits. And then the credit I'm going to select for my journal entry is going to be the revenue account 4100. And I can assign the department and the location, or those dimensions will autofill based on the bank account. So if you don't have a department and you don't on the bank account, that won't autofill, which means your revenue won't have a department. So you do want to look at your dimensions and think about what dimensions you'll want to put on this template. And if you put it in a posting state of draft, as I did in this example, then you can always review it and make any changes for the particular transaction that may need to be customized a little bit more at the time of entry. And then you want to attach that rule to a rule set. So you already have a rule set in action. So all you need to do then is edit the rule set that's already being used and add this one to it. So you can have match rules and create rules in the same set. And then don't forget to select the bank accounts that you want to assign this set to. Assuming they were the same, you wouldn't need to revisit that. But if this changes anything and you want to add a bank account for this rule set, you would go to that second tab and make sure the right bank accounts are selected here. And these particular features that I've just reviewed can be seen on the Setup tab if you have given yourself the right permissions for these. So if you don't see these on the Cash Management Setup tab, the two red square rectangle boxes down there, If you don't see those, then that means you didn't give yourself the permissions to see them and utilize them. So you want to make sure that you do that. And at the bottom where it says reconciliation transaction templates, and it just has journal entry as an option. Well, the release notes indicated that there will be other template options coming in future releases. So the goal really is to get this cash management bank reconciliation as automated and quick as possible, which I know would be great for so many of you. And if you didn't know, with the bank feed, you can reconcile on a daily basis. So if you wanted to make sure your cash activity is recorded regularly and you want to reconcile to the bank balance, you can go online, see your bank balance, and go into the reconciliation screen and update that balance every day. And as long as you don't hit reconcile, you just hit draft and continue, or save and continue, whatever it says, then you can keep your bank account reconciled daily. And then when you get to the end of the month and you get your statement, then most everything would already be matched. You would just complete it for, say, the last day or the last week, and then reconcile, and you'd be done in 5 minutes. So that rule set performance log I really like, because so many times I've set up rules for clients and it seems like we're still having to manually match a lot of transactions. And I don't know why. And so this performance log gives you this whole list of your rules, and well, it has your rule set if you filter by rule set, or it would just show your individual rules. In this particular example, I typed in rule set under rule set ID so that I could see the rule set that included 2 rules and what it had been used on. So based on this log, I can see that on the 17th at 8:18, it processed 239 bank transactions, but it only looked at 40 Intacct transactions to find matches, which means I didn't have a significant portion of my activity recorded yet in cash. So I can see that I have a lot of entry to do. Or if I'm the controller reviewing a staff accountant's progress, I can see on this list that a lot more has cleared the bank than they have recorded in the ledger. So they need to get caught up. And then I can see the number of bank transactions that were matched. Well, if it only matched 2 out of the 40 Intacct or the 239 bank, then I can see I need to update my rules, because the criteria that I have set is not finding anything, which means I need to change the criteria and really look at how my bank brings in information. And something that is a common issue relates to where the bank puts their data in various fields. Like recently, I did a rule for check number. Look at the document number field in the bank and compare it to the document number field in Intacct. And if they match, then it's a match. Well, my bank didn't bring in the check number in the document number field. We were using a third-party payment app like a bill.com or one of those, and it put the check number in the description field, which I never would have thought of, and I never would have built a rule to look for that. So I had to change my rule to say, look in the description field of the bank transactions for this number and compare it to the document number field in Intacct. And if those are a match, then, and the amount's a match, then it's the right match. So just, review those with a discerning eye to try and figure out, how it's working to make it better. And another part of the new release has to do with reporting. You now have the option to include inactive dimensions. So if you had activity in a dimension and then you made it inactive, well, if you are running historical reports, you're going to want that data to still pull. And so in your user preferences, which is found in the upper right-hand corner by your name, you click on My Preferences. If you scroll down to the bottom to General Preferences, then right below it, you'll see Report Filters. You can choose to display all values or hide inactive values. And for existing users, the value will remain hide inactive unless you go into the setting and change it. For new users, the default is going to be display all values, and inactive accounts and dimensions will appear in the selection list. You can also hide them individually on a report. So on the filters tab, when you're building a financial report, you've got the tabs down the left side. If you click the filters one, where you would normally select a particular department or other dimension, then you can check the box to hide inactives or uncheck it. So again, one of two ways to utilize this functionality. And updates in inventory. There's quite a bit of improvements in stockable kits. You can now track them by serial number, lot number, bin, expiration date, or any combination. And if you're building a kit, you can enable tracking for parent and component items. So when you put together, when you build the kit or when you take the kit apart, you can indicate the tracking and the inventory related to either the pieces or the whole. So I know in the previous client system that didn't use Intacct, that was always an issue, trying to get their inventory correct when they were building kits. So if that is included in your business, you want to definitely check out this enhancement. Another area relates to inventory is cycle counts. So the functionality to support just a better cycle count, periodic smaller inventory count is previously there wasn't that box in the green, the checkbox that says show quantity on hand. So when you go to start, when you select a cycle count information, you can choose that. And then when you select the items on the right, where my green arrow is pointing, when they come up on the screen, you will be able to see any activity, or you'll see all items that have had activity on them. And it'll show you if the system is showing a negative quantity on hand, which isn't possible, or zero or positive. And so then you can select those particular items to include in your cycle count. And so then so when you select those and then you do your count, when you reconcile it, that's another step. You reconcile the cycle count. You can indicate the quantity and the adjustment that needed to be made. You'll see in this example that had quantity on hand a -5, but the quantity counted was 10. So they're going to make, Intacct is going to make an adjustment of 15. And if, because that's going to involve a cost, you're going to want to attach that to specific dimensions. So you're going to now be able to open that middle section, cycle count dimensions, and apply those dimensions specifically to this cycle count, which is also a new feature. Inventory also has an early adopter program in place now. They are testing out functionality for fulfillment of orders. So particularly great for distribution companies. If a customer orders a selection of inventory items, you can now move the process through a workflow where you can assign an employee picker with a pick status, and that will assign an employee to go then pack, and you can pack the package where they print off a list of the items that they want in their order, and that particular employee can walk the warehouse, find the items, get them off the shelf, put them in the box, then convert the process to a shipping document, and produce the label, box it up, and then convert it to an invoice. Other features of the inventory early adopter relates to committing quantities. So if you've got an order that's being placed but not quite ready to go through the whole process, you can commit those items in advance to dedicate them in the system. You can also now utilize simple tax. There's a new configuration option that will distribute the subtotals created at the entity level. And you can control how to set the dimension values at the top level in a multi-entity environment. So all of these are features being tested out. And if you're interested in participating in the testing in the early adopter program, please submit a ticket to techhelp@lbmc.com, and we'll be happy to assist you with that. So a true/false question. I can record a journal entry to cash directly from my bank feed. True or false? So if you were listening, you learned that this new release now includes a create rule as opposed to a match rule that already existed. So this create rule does in fact allow you to create a journal entry to cash. So this would be true if you set up the create rule and put that in your rule set for the bank account that you are utilizing, then it will be able to record a journal entry directly from the bank feed. And I don't know if I mentioned, but the credit side of the entry, or the debit side, if it's a cash withdrawal, whatever the offsetting side is, can only have one line, so one GL account. So I had a situation where a client wanted to set up a journal entry for a loan payment because the amount is the same every month it comes out. The total amount's the same. And so they wanted to record that through a journal entry. Well, they needed to be able to adjust the interest portion every month. And so what I had them do was to record the full amount to the principal and post it, not post it, but save it in draft. And then when they are reviewing the draft journal entry, they would then be able to split it into the two pieces. And so that because it's a brand new feature, they're just trying it out. I haven't heard how that worked, but that was my suggestion for a workaround if you do need to be able to split the posting in that journal entry. So now we'll move on to some of the industry functionality, the deep industry expertise area that Intacct wanted to focus on. This relates to contracts. Contracts is a more specialized module of Intacct that many of you may not be using, but if you do have any type of long-term contract with customers that involves a revenue recognition issue, you might want to consider Intacct's module. It's very advanced and works great. So this particular enhancement came from the community, came from an idea submitted by you to simplify evergreen contracts, which are, those are indefinite. They have no ending period, so they go on into perpetuity like an evergreen tree. Previously, you would have to set up a contract to renew for each billing period, resulting in separate child contracts and very cumbersome reporting. And so in this release, they have eliminated the extra maintenance by automating open-ended contracts. So now you can easily bill auto-renewing subscriptions and report and forecast on the billing and revenue data. So the new configuration option is called term type options, and you select whether you're going to support termed, evergreen, or both. And then another idea that came from you related to contracts has to do with cancellations. When you cancel a contract line, you now have the option to automatically create an adjustment if there is an outstanding invoice that's never going to be paid. In this scenario, Intact's going to create a credit memo for you in AR that's going to debit deferred revenue and credit billed AR. Previously, users needed to manually apply this adjustment to the correct contract invoice, and this sometimes led to incorrect contract accounting when the adjustment was applied to the wrong invoice. And then finally, the last area is just a change in naming. Previously, there was a menu option for generate invoice filter sets. So this was when it came time to invoice off your contracts, you would select that option and then select your filter criteria for what invoices you wanted to produce that day. But now that functionality is called invoice policies, and it encourages you to create an invoice policy based on the filter criteria. So you would save that criteria and name it a particular invoice policy and reuse that every time that you came in to invoice. So you would have possibly, multiple different policies of when you're invoicing, on what schedule. And this is leading into some more improvements on automation functionality. And so if you're not currently using those saved filters, Intacct is encouraging you to change that and start taking advantage of that feature so that you can become more familiar with invoice policies and be prepared for future functionality and your automation there. And then in the construction module, there is quite a bit of changes related to the project, utilizing project accounting within the construction industry. You can use these contract lines to capture and include a mix of billable details into your project. When you associate a contract line with a change order, your project billing will now reflect the price change automatically. You can also map tasks, specific project tasks, to project contract lines to ensure that billed transactions are attributed automatically to the correct project contract line, and use the assigned rate table for markups and bill rates. So these are very specific functionality related to the construction module. If you are not using it and you want more information on it, if you need the construction module, reach out to your Sage Intacct account manager. And there are some advancements in the Salesforce integration with Sage Intacct. If you have that connection already, you'll be interested to see how to sync contract usage records and price lists. So I encourage you to look more into that if you do utilize that functionality. And finally, the user experience has changed, which you've, I'm sure, already noticed. The logo and color scheme are different. If you want more information about why Sage is changing or tell them what you think about it, there's a customer brand change information page. You can look that up in the community. And the new look was designed for the simpler sign-in experience, less busy homepage, and then the option for the black or white header color. If you have a company, if you have your company logo, you can select, actually, I'm sorry, if you have a logo, the header color will remain white. But if you don't have your own logo in the header, you'll see that it probably is showing up black right now. You can actually choose to change that to white if you don't have your logo. And you would go into the company setup configuration company tab. So on the general information of the whole overall company setting, at the bottom, there is a display area that can choose black or white. So I know I've gone over a lot. This was a big new release, but hopefully you have gotten some good information to take back to your team. If you need more training on Intacct, some options for you are the Intacct Learning Center that you can access from your homepage. And then if you're not aware, there are customer office hours offered by Sage Intacct that are free for 1 hour sessions that are interactive. They allow you to ask questions directly to the Intacct expert. And these are the upcoming dates and topics. Again, go to the community and search for customer office hours to get registered. But I encourage you to take advantage of those opportunities. And then we will have these topics, these sessions again after release 3, which will be August 19th, and release 4, which comes out on Veterans Day of this year, November 11th. So just keep an eye out for emails from Sarah inviting you to these sessions again. And if you have any ideas that you'd like to see us do for future hot topic session, the part that I did on the new release, on the vendor payments, that could be on any Intacct related feature. If you want a learn session on something, submit your idea to Angela.Payne, Payne, at lbmc.com. And she'll be happy to consider that. Or to me, there's my email address, Martha.Reinhart at lbmc.com. And I appreciate your attendance and look forward to working with you. Feel free to reach out if you need anything.
All right, thank you so much, Martha. Great presentation. I know we covered a lot of information. So now we're going to turn it over to Casey Paget with FloQast, and she's going to be talking about best practices with your month-end close and so much more. So welcome, Casey. We're so glad to have you, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Sarah, and hi, everyone. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Casey Paget, and I'm a channel partner manager here at FloQast. I've had the pleasure of being the main point of contact for the FloQast partnership with LBMC, but at a larger scale, I really manage all of our partnerships in the Sage ecosystem. Myself, I am actually a former accountant. I like to say turned software fanatic. So as we go through today and we're talking about some of these practices, I know you all are living in these shoes right now, but one thing I do want to mention is both myself as well as about 70% of our team at FloQast are former accountants and kind of have been through this as well. So I mention that because these best practices do come from a place of tried and true methods. So super excited to be here with you today. So let's just jump right in. Let's talk about some best practices. So before we get started, actually, let me stop myself. I want to share a little about FloQast and just who we are. If you're not familiar, FloQast provides accounting workflow automation software. We were purpose-built by accountants for accountants. As I mentioned on a previous slide, again, 70% of our frontline FloQasters are accountants, and even our founders actually are as well. And they lived through the problem of the month-end close for a few years and recognize that the opportunity to build a tool really to help accounting teams just work smarter, not harder during this time period. We've been around for nearly 10 years. We've helped over 1,600 accounting teams with their month-end close and their audit by extending the ERP's task management and reconciliation capabilities. Now, over time, the product has matured and expanded, but really the core of the software and our bread and butter is around the month-end close. So again, we'll really dive into some of those topics today with some best practices that we've picked up along the way to increase the efficiency of your close. And now I know on this call we have lots of accountants, or at least folks that are involved with the accounting processes in Sage Intacct. But before we really dive into the meat and potatoes of the presentation, I want to just take a moment and level our conversation and just ask the simple question, what is the month-end close? Simply put, the month-end close is the collection of financial accounting information, the review, and the reconciliation of records each month. Closing the books, as you know, is an essential part of the accounting cycle. If you're a public company, this is a requirement. But even for private companies, whether you're planning on going public or not, it is just as important, as the month-end close gives you a true indication of your company's financial health. During the close, there are many steps, many processes that are occurring at the same time. You're probably likely familiar with completing tasks around your consolidations, your reconciliations, and of course, adjusting your journal entries during that period close. Now, over time, we've heard from our clients, we've heard from accountants alike that the close is a very stressful period in your life. And for many of our clients, they've reported missing birthdays, personal life events, and just even some things that may seem a little small in nature, but it's just led to an overwhelming sense of burnout during the close. So, my goal today is not to scare you about the close, especially as it's June 1st and we're getting ready to close the books for May, but it's just to give you an idea of some areas where we can improve efficiencies. During the presentation for me today, we'll have a few focus areas that we'll center this around. First is the month-end workflow. Second is the reconciliation process. And lastly, where we're storing the files and the supporting documentation for the close. So between those three pillars, I'll first address some steps that we can take to achieve a more efficient close. I'll talk about some challenges that could occur, maybe you're familiar with facing, and I will spend just a little bit of time talking about where automation can make this process easier for you. So we'll talk about where FloQast can improve your month-end close. But again, there are going to be many takeaways that you can implement today without adopting a solution. Starting on the workflow side of things, I want to start with a little data that we've gathered. So we conducted a survey with Dimensional Research. We asked mid-market accounting teams, which of the following statements best describes your existing close process? And we found that 71% of accounting teams were not documenting their month-end close procedures. They actually indicated on the survey that their existing close process was tribal knowledge amongst the team, meaning, simply put, that lived in their head. So everything that needed to be done in terms of tasks that needed to be completed, journal entries that needed to be posted, or entries that needed to be reconciled, all of that lived in the brains of the accountants, and it was hope and luck that this all got communicated back and forth to each other. And there may be some of you on the call where you're in the same boat. And if you're a 1 or 2 person accounting team, it could work. That's definitely a realistic option for a smaller team. But if you do have a team that's larger than 2 people, it might get a little complicated if you just keep it as tribal knowledge. So if you have plans on scaling, or if your team is spread out across the country, or even just not all coming into the office at once, I would definitely recommend working towards a documented close process. So our first best practice tip here is to create a collaborative month-end close checklist. Now, if you have multiple checklists floating around your department, your first step here is to consolidate all of those individual checklists into one. If you don't have a closed checklist in place, your first step is just getting all of that information onto paper or into Excel, into a document where you can track your checklist month over month. When you're doing this, you really want to be as prescriptive as possible and include each step, each task that's included in your close process. Um, if you're working on building a close checklist, or again, if you need to maybe spruce it up during this close that you're about to go through, this is a good time to just take note of what you're doing each day in each task. So for example, here, one item that you can include is a list of the recurring journal entries that need to be booked each period. To you, it may be a no-brainer, but if you go out on vacation, or if you bring in additional resources to assist the team, you want to make sure this lives in a central area so that they can review that information too. We've also found that it can be helpful to group your task by specific account or by process. So for example, you might want to group all of your AR tasks together. And this is a great opportunity for you to create specialization across your team as well. Just be mindful if you do create that specialization, just be careful not to silo your employees into that one specific task. This is a really big factor in ensuring you consolidate all of those checklists together, because what this will do is give you and your team the ability to actually view the cause and effect. And having knowledge of the bigger picture is how you can leverage the minds of your team to be more efficient and more strategic when it relates to the close and even activities outside of the close. And lastly, when you're creating this checklist, let's think about how you should organize the checklist itself. A best rule of thumb is to organize your tasks based on where they fall in relation to the close. So as you're completing activities, just ask yourself, is this a pre-close activity? Is this a mid-close? Does this take place during the close? Or could it wait to be a post-close activity? A couple of examples of this, one, for instance, if you have a fiscal month and you are reconciling or checking through your billing accounts, set a deadline to have all the billing finalized, maybe the Thursday before you actually lead into the close. This will ensure that you have all of those pre-close billing activities completed so that when you go to the close and you need to reconcile some of those items, you can ensure that it was all completed ahead of time and you're not chasing down additional tasks there. Whereas another side of the coin, think about your fixed assets. So if you need to depreciate those fixed assets month over month, it might make more sense to book that in the month following the close period. And just being prescriptive about when you're going to do these activities can help you create a repeatable process moving forward. And making these policy tweaks will really lead to a drastic efficiency gain for you and your team over time. And so let's be realistic here. Excel is an incredible tool. It's super powerful. We all use it every day, but it simply was not built to sustain the tracking of workflows. So when you're creating these checklists, there are some limitations that you should just be aware of. So you can act proactively against those. You'll still have to meet pretty frequently with your team to get status updates. So even though you consolidate this information into a checklist, you'll still want to communicate with your team pretty often to ask questions around why certain items may have been a little late, what if you're looking for additional data to support some of the checklist items. So right now, this is a good example. We're here on a WebEx talking today, so there's probably many of you that might still be working from home. Your teams may, again, kind of be all over the country. So this just increases the difficulty of communicating effectively with your team during the close. But as long as you are aware of that and you are kind of prepared to address that, this is something that you can do to combat the limitation of Excel. And because the checklist itself is still pretty manual in nature, identifying bottlenecks can be a little difficult as well. You'll still be relying on those status meetings to get updates. So just be aware when you're having those updates, taking notes of some of the activities that may be taking longer than others. If you see that month over month over month, there is a staff accountant on the team who is having a hard time finishing their task, it might make sense to just reevaluate and see if there's some other resources you can add to those to assist with getting them completed in time. And just keep in mind that that constant back and forth communication could be a little bit of a slowdown for the team. But again, if we're communicating effectively there, we can kind of help with those. And documenting the process really is step one here. That's why we led off with it, but you'll want to make sure that you are creating a repeatable process. This will help ensure your accuracy each month and your speed to close each month. But again, you can't exactly rely on Excel 100% to create that repeatable process. You need to be very prescriptive in how you're building out the checklist and how you're managing your teams to move through that each month. Now let's just move over into how FloQast close software actually automates some of these hurdles for you. So before FloQast on the left-hand side, you're likely all familiar with these tools and you're probably using a range of them to complete your close activities each month. So what FloQast does is we actually take those disparate systems and we act as an interactive workflow tool. This provides complete visibility into the ongoing checklist items. And you can see on the right-hand side, this is a screenshot from the software. This is our April 2022 checklist for the accounts receivable folder. You can see here that we have a description of the checklist item. In that description, you can drill down and actually see steps that need to be taken to actually verify the invoices. You can see the due date along with who is the assigned preparer and reviewer. Now, one great feature about this is once those items are checked off, they are time and date stamped. So you can go back and see when the action was completed down to the minute. And it will require that additional reviewer sign off as well. So just an added layer of security during your close to make sure you're checking through all of those items. The last piece I'll mention here is you also have the ability to communicate with your team within the platform. So you can post notes, you can post links to reports, different things that just back up your checklist items that you may need to share across the team. So let's switch gears a little and let's talk about the reconciliations. So reconciliations can be a pain, but one really big step in making them a little less of a burden is just to create some standard operating procedures around the account recs. To do this, you should start by documenting every step in the process to ensure redundancy. And I cannot emphasize that enough. Truly, every single step is going to help you be more prepared. An example I love to use for this, we had a client who detailing their reconciliations in the software, and they got really granular with it. They were exporting their AP report each month, last day of the month by 5 p.m., and they had to do it by 5 p.m. And not only that, the export needed to be in a CSV file. So just small little items like that that may seem like they're not a great deal in the grand scheme of things really will make sure that your reconciliations are being completed accurately and consistently, period over period. So again, it just ensures that no matter who is touching the reconciliation, um, it's going to be consistent and repeatable time over time. Next is to start saving your documents in a centralized place. We'll talk a lot about some organization tactics a little later in this presentation, but I do want to mention while we're on the reconciliation page that it will make all the difference if you can start saving your documentation in a central area, an area that is not only accessible to you, but your entire team as they're closing the books. Obviously within reason for security purposes, but you want to have all that information centralized so that if you need to go back in a following period and review something, it's all there. But not only that, if you're a public company or again, maybe prepping to go public, you'll always be audit ready with your reconciliations and the supporting documents. Lastly, here on reconciliations, a best practice is to perform a risk assessment on the account. So this will allow you to create more efficient process that evolves with you over time. So this is something you can continuously do. Right off the bat, you'll be able to notice efficiency gains, but again, month over month, you can start to identify some areas where you can create more efficient processes. An example for your low risk accounts, you might want to conduct a quarterly risk assessment, whereas for high risk accounts, you might want to do it more frequently at monthly. And the volatility of the accounts really will differ company to company. It is pretty subjective. There's not a black and white answer I can give you, but consider the materiality threshold of the accounts you're reconciling. And not just that, consider the number of transactions that are occurring monthly. You may have a high materiality threshold on a certain account, but if you're conducting hundreds of transactions each month, that's definitely something you might want to start reviewing monthly versus quarterly. And on this slide, we have a diagram that really outlines the integration points with FloQast. So in terms of reconciliations, this is where we connect all the systems to automate the process. You can think of FloQast as a bridge, so between the ERP with Sage Intacct and with your cloud storage provider. On the left-hand side of the equation is our integration to Sage Intacct. What this integration allows us to do is pull your trial balances from Intacct in real time. Now, we are a Sage Intacct Marketplace partner, so this integration is turnkey and quick to set up. In fact, our setup takes about 3 to 6 weeks in order for you to get live and rolling in the system. So really great to have that turnkey integration with Sage Intacct. But again, focus point here, we're pulling in your trial balances in real time. And on the right-hand side of the equation is the integration with the cloud storage provider. This allows the software to compare that real-time trial balance we pulled out of Sage Intacct with the ending balance from the reconciliations that they correspond with. Now, one big focus here too is that we do integrate directly into Excel. And again, I mentioned we are built by accountants for an accountant, and so we recognize that Excel is truly just one of the best tools for an accountant to leverage. So our integration accommodates this to live where you live currently. And before I move forward, just going to point a couple things out on the screenshot here in terms of functionality. This gives you a full list of your reconciliations by entity, by account. In the middle-ish of the computer screen there, you can see the per GL balance. That is what's pulling directly from Sage Intacct. Next to that is the per Excel balance. And you might notice a slight blue hyperlink, and you can actually click into that number and it will take you to the tie out directly in your Excel file. So you can go straight to the source if you need to identify or need to reconcile a balance that may be out of balance. Similar to the checklist area, you'll also have the preparer and reviewer sign-offs. You'll have your time and date stamps. You can share notes, communicate back and forth. But one additional feature here is you can set materiality thresholds. And that's especially important when you think about as you're moving through the close, let's say you sign off on a reconciliation item, you get your preparer to sign off and your reviewer, and you are good to go. It's done. Well, if something happens in the ERP and there is something posted that makes that go out of balance, FloQast will alert you right away of that out of balance account. And even though you signed off on it, we will turn that off so that you can go back and review to ensure that everything truly is accurate before you close out that period. Another burdensome portion of the reconciliation process is just simply reconciling transactions for high volume accounts. If it takes a long time, it's just typically not something you're going to look forward to each month. So with our auto rec functionality, we can help you automate the process of reconciling those transactions. We have some proprietary algorithms and AI, and we couple that with some formatting rules, and we can reconcile around 80% of your transactions for you right off the bat. And this does include one-to-one transactions. Those are a little simpler. Also one-to-many and many-to-many transactions. So it's a very powerful tool that replaces the manual nature of just comparing multiple systems back and forth to reconcile the transactions. And now moving on to our last area for best practices, let's focus in on the organization. Now this seems really simple, and it might be, but it really is effective and it will make a huge difference in your close practices. Create an organized folder structure for all of your transactions and all of your documentations. We've heard time and time again that one of the biggest challenges during the close is just trying to find the information you need. And more specifically, especially if you're going through an audit, going back in time to find that information to support your close activities can be extremely, extremely burdensome. So being intentional about your organization can really lower this hurdle significantly. We recommend using a structure similar to the one here on the screen, starting with what entity it belongs to, what year, month, down to the accounting process. And you'll want to make sure that you carry this organization over period over period. I know my goal today was to talk about how to be more efficient, but I would recommend assigning this out as a task to a member of your team to roll this forward each period. It is one extra step, but it's one that will never be wasted. And it's one that can significantly affect your close month over month. So let's just wind down a little bit. We hit a lot of different pieces, but let's just talk about three real main takeaways here. First is let's upgrade our Excel checklist related to the month-end close. So for some on the call, that could mean creating a close checklist. For others, it could mean putting in the time to consolidate it. But again, we're walking away today, entering into the May close. So I would definitely recommend revisiting your month-end close checklist and taking this time to be prescriptive. Second is let's centralize our reconciliation process, the procedures around reconciliations, and organizing the support for those as well. And remember, creating SOPs will seriously do wonders for you to ensure the accuracy and consistency month over month. And just having that information centralized and detailed will also save you some serious time. And last but not least, quite simple, but integrate an organized folder structure with your entire process. And again, be sure to maintain that going forward so that you can always track down exactly what you need, even if the period has passed. This is just a great way to integrate all of that information together and have it centralized. And before I go, I will take one last look at how FloQast puts these pieces together. So a little bit larger of a screenshot than some of the others we saw earlier, but again, just a reminder, FloQast is acting as a bridge between your ERP and that cloud storage. We're linking your folder structure with the checklist task, the reconciliations, and the documents to support each account. So in this screenshot, looking at the left-hand side, you can see that we mirror the folder structure. So for this, we're looking at the FloQast US entity. We're looking at the April 2022 accounts receivable account. And towards the middle to right-hand side, you can see at the top, we have our checklist. So this shows, again, their assigned preparer reviewer. You can see the description of the checklist item. For this particular checklist, I have it filtered out for ready for review checklist items only. So there are other ones there, but you can filter out between those. In the middle is the document section, and this is going to populate all supporting documents for the account. So for this particular AR account, we have 5 documents that we're pulling in from the cloud storage provider to have that all in one central area. And then finally, at the bottom of this screen is the reconciliation piece. So this is again tying in the real-time trial balance from Sage Intacct, and it's tying it out to the ending balance within your reconciliation document, typically Excel. And this area of the software under folders is an extremely powerful area for all members of your team to bake in a repeatable structured month-end close process. They can go to this one area and really focus in on the activities and the tasks that they need to complete. So before I go, I do want to mention through our partnership with LBMC and just as a thank you for spending some time with us today to talk about these things, we do have some free resources that we will be sharing. First is our ultimate month-end close checklist. There's a screenshot of that on the right. As you can see, it's pretty detailed. We've taken stories from our customers, examples from our customers, and built a guide to help you create and consolidate your month-end close checklist. So if you don't have a checklist, this is an incredible tool to start. If you do already have a checklist, I'd still recommend taking a peek. There might be something on here that you didn't think of and might want to add in. Second is our best practice Excel reconciliation templates. And this is going to have some examples, I believe 3 different account reconciliation examples that will include steps that you need to take to reconcile, how to document your reconciliations, and some best practices around the SOPs that are created for those. So 2 really awesome resources. And again, we will be sharing those following this session, probably early next week. And I know we are live, so people can't hop in with questions, but Sarah, I'll pause here to see if any questions have come in throughout the presentation. Maybe I can address right here.
I don't see any questions right now, Casey. But unless there's anything else, I'll go ahead and close us out. And if anybody does think of questions, please email us at info@lbmctech.com, or there's Casey's information. Casey, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, that was it. Just wanted to say thank you again to everyone for joining. For the $50 lunch gift cards, we will be sending those out shortly once we wrap this up. So you should have that in your inbox by the end of the day.
Yep. So I know we covered a lot of content today. We'll be sending out the recording as well as the slides. We will also include a survey, like Martha said, if you have any feedback or topics you'd like us to cover in the future, please let us know. But thank you everyone for attending and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, Casey.